I love our speaker today. I really do. We haven't known each other that long, last, I guess, 4 years or so. But Hugh Ross, Canadian by birth, but has been in America longer than Canada, came to faith in Jesus when you were in college. And he's an astrophysicist. He's smart. But he loves Jesus. And he wants to see people come to faith in Jesus. And even though he leads an apologetics ministry, it is apologetics for the sake of evangelism, and that is at the heart of what they do. And created a ministry called Reasons to Believe. And if you have your smartphone or tablet, why don't you go ahead right now and just type in as a search, reasons.org. Reasons.org, and then you can find the link there to all of their social media pages as well. But there is more information there than you can watch or read in a month. There's a lot of stuff there covering a lot of different topics. So I encourage you to check out that website and follow them on social media. But Hugh, if I'm not mistaken, this past July 24 was a really important day. Did you turn 80? Happy birthday, brother. And he's still sharing Jesus and doing ministry. We appreciate you. He's going to talk about artificial intelligence. Would you welcome Brother Hugh Ross?
Thank you. Well, thank you for that introduction. We've had a wonderful time at the conference here these past few days. And yeah, scan this QR code. You'll get a free copy of this book, Testable Faith. I wrote 2 of the chapters in that book, but you also hear from the other scholars there as well. And I've been asked to speak about artificial intelligence. And the wonderful thing about this new interest in artificial intelligence is that the more we learn about artificial intelligence, or what everybody now calls AI, the more evidence we gain that we humans are more than just machines or living matter. We really are dual. We have a physical nature and a spiritual nature, and that a God beyond the cosmos must exist. So artificial intelligence is actually giving us an enormous opportunity to spread the Christian faith to people who are not yet followers of Jesus Christ. And I'm going to actually give you a little history of the development of AI. You just heard I'm 80 years of age. I'm old enough to remember when AI first got its launch. And that was back in 1961 and 62, where I was growing up in British Columbia, and there was only one computer in the entire province. It was an IBM 7090. It was the first transistorized computer. Before that, it was all vacuum tubes, which meant they really couldn't do a whole lot of calculations. But this one had 50,000 transistors. So it was stunning what it could do. It cost over $3 million. It filled a 3-story engineering building. But at age 16, I was actually given the opportunity to write some software on that computer and run some data, because already I was involved in research on T-Tauri stars in the Orion Nebula and other nebulas, so they gave me access to that computer. Here's what one of the rooms of the IBM 7090 looks like. Just one room. It actually goes down another 2 stories. So it's a small part of the 7090 computer. Okay, 50,000 transistors. Let's compare that with an Apple laptop computer that today sells for $1,000 instead of $3 million. And keep in mind, that's $3,019,061. So you can figure out, well, that's probably a neighborhood of $250 million today. So for $1,000, you get 67 trillion transistors. That's how much they can pack into that little laptop computer. Supercomputers have over 12 quadrillion transistors in them. And so there's been an enormous advance in the capability, and it's this hardware that's enabled us to build these large language machines that can analyze huge databases and synthesize them in a matter of seconds. So for example, I can take a big research paper, 30,000 words long, that's being published in a scientific journal, and I can tell ChatGPT please convert this into a comic book that 8th grade readers can read. And it'll spit it out within a few minutes. Or, produce a video. It'll produce a video or a slideshow. So it's making the jobs of speakers a lot easier. But I'm going to give you some warnings. If you don't have the right person working with the AI system, you won't get very good results. Okay, now the first computer programs were error and bug intolerant. The thing I noticed back in 1962 is that when you wrote a computer program, of course it was on computer cards, that's the way it was back then, is that the slightest error, it would spit back and make you fix the error. You fix the error, it discovers another error. So you're running it back and forth and over again. And of course, because there was only one computer in the entire province of British Columbia, they basically said, look, when you come into the computing center, we don't want to run into any bugs. Please work on this. And you literally would work on a program that you'd write in one day, but spend weeks getting all the bugs out because it was so expensive to run the computer program again. Now we have self-learning. In other words, you can put in a computer program that's filled with bugs, and there's software that'll actually find all the bugs and correct them for you. So for example, a few years ago, I began a conversation with a physicist in Ukraine. He didn't know any English, I didn't know any Ukraine, but we used the Google Translate, and I can tell you the first few rounds we weren't communicating. But Google Translate kept correcting the errors. It could tell that we were frustrated that we weren't communicating with one another. After about 6 months, it was like he was fluent in English and I was fluent in Ukrainian. That's how good the error correction became. And it's all based on what we call associative learning. Associative learning is basically data mining and a learning technique that finds important relations between variables and features in a data set. The thing you need to understand about artificial intelligence, it's totally dependent on the databases you feed into it. But if you feed in a large number of databases, it makes it easier to correct its errors. And if you ever use ChatGPT and it spits out an answer for you, often it'll ask you the question, how well did I do? And you say, not very well at all. And so that actually goes into the software and they say, okay, we're not going to repeat that error again. We'll try something different. How well did I do this time? Oh, you still blew it. Well, if that happens often enough, eventually ChatGPT gets the right result. Now, AI does not generate new databases. It does not generate new variables. It's totally dependent on human beings feeding it the variables in the databases that need to be analyzed. So people think that these things can think and reason. They can't. They simply can analyze databases that are fed into it. So it's humans that can develop new variables and new databases. Now, often what is deceptive to people, AI is capable of taking the databases that's been fed into it and developing a new database, but the database is basically a synthesis of the other databases that have been brought into it. So you can actually narrow the parameters and say, well, look at all the databases, but this is what I really want. And sometimes users look at it and say, I think that's a brand new database. It isn't. It's just an analyzed set of the databases that have already been fed into it. Now, there's this term called deep AI, which identifies hidden correlations in the databases. So you feed all these databases in it, the human user may not realize correlations that are embedded in it. AI can find those correlations and spit them out to you and say, oh, I didn't see that in the database. And it does that by applying what's called a measure of interestingness. But it's dependent on the human AI programmer basically saying, this is what I'm interested in, and it really helps if you can tell the AI system, this is what I really don't care 2 bits about. So it basically tells the AI system, don't bother analyzing this, analyze this because that's what the user is interested in. And so this is really what associative learning is all about. And for it to be effective, it needs large, diverse databases. And so these Gemini systems that you may have used, that's what makes them effective, is that they're analyzing extremely large databases and very diverse databases. It does not generate new databases, and it works best when a human determines what is interesting And it works best when you got the best expert in the area working with the AI system. The algorithms, you've probably heard that term. An algorithm simply counts the frequency of complementary occurrences, associations across a large selection of items or actions. And I'll tell you where all of you have encountered this. It's when you go into a brick and mortar store. They use an AI system and they basically take data. What do people buy? And what do people buy when they buy one product? Do they buy another product? So for example, if you walk into a Trader Joe's, what you notice is all the fresh flowers are there at the end and right behind where they're selling the freshly baked bread. They know that if people associate the two things, they're likely to buy both. And so AI is designed to trick you into buying a lot of products you don't really need. And the same thing happens when you're purchasing items online. Have you ever gone to a major online thing like Amazon, you notice that you click for a search for one item, it'll pop up several more because AI has told them, hey, if a customer buys X, chances are they might be motivated to buy Y and Z, and so it pops up Y and Z. And of course, they create a new database where they look at your purchasing history, and based on your purchasing history, they feed you new stuff that they think they can entice you to buy. And it's actually been demonstrated that AI actually encourages people to buy more stuff than they would buy without AI. So you're being tricked into spending your money thanks to the AI systems. Okay, machine learning. These are computers programmed to learn without being explicitly programmed to learn through reinforcement learning. In other words, what programmers have figured is how to reward the AI system, how to, quote, make it feel good when it gets the correct answer. And so most AI advances do involve this machine learning. And it works best when a balance is struck between existing analysis of current knowledge and exploration of databases that have not yet been charted. And so this is where AI can be very powerful. It's already analyzed a certain set of databases, but then begins to go into uncharted area. And by the way, these online purchasing companies like Walmart and Amazon, they're onto this. And so they look at this kind of thing and say, what new product that the customer hasn't even thought about might I entice them to buy? And so they'll throw that out there, and AI is basically telling them what new gadgets or brand new items that you've never even heard of to put in front of you and how to make them look attractive, what colors to use. This is all developed. In fact, what's interesting, AI, a good AI system, will look at you as an individual customer. They know what colors you prefer, they know what kind of music you prefer, and they actually build that all in to the sales pitch to get you to buy the stuff. So just a warning, you're being tricked by AI to spend your hard-earned money. Okay. If you want to know why America is so polarized, AI has discovered the more they can divide people against one another, the more they can polarize them politically in other ways, the more products they buy. And so if you're wondering why our politics is so divided today compared to what it was 20 years ago, AI has figured out, hey, we can actually get people buying more stuff if we can make them more politically divided from one another. It also works in churches. If we can get people in different churches more divided against one another, they'll buy more stuff. So if you're wondering why we have such polarization and division, such sharp and mean-spirited debate, it sells. People buy more stuff in that kind of context. We're all calm and confident and self-satisfied. We don't need anything, right? No need to buy stuff. But if we feel threatened or divided, hey, what can I do to make myself feel better? Okay. A paper got published in Nature recently, basically saying, how can we make AI work better? And they did a variety of experiments where they were basically trying to use AI to develop more efficient and energy-efficient computer chips. And so they had AI try to figure out all by itself what's the best computer chip to achieve the ends that we want to meet. Then they had AI partner with junior engineers in that particular discipline of chip design and see what they came up with. Then they had people work with engineers that weren't educated or trained at all in chip design and make that work. And finally, they did a thing where they worked with the very best human chip designers and AI. and discovered they got the best results with the latter thing. You need to team up AI with the best human expert in that area. That's where you get the best results. They also determine when you need to bring in the human being. And what they discovered is you need to bring the human in at the very beginning and basically tell the AI system, these are the parameters I want you to search. Please don't look there, but look here. And then you want AI to run for a while, and then you want the human to jump in and basically fine-tune the results. I'll give you an example just from my own personal experience. I had this article written that's basically designed at the graduate physics level. And I said, hey, ChatGPT, see if you can translate this so an 8th grader that doesn't have any science background can read this and understand it. If you let it run, the science that came out was totally wrong. So what I figured out is, okay, I'm not going to give it the whole paper. I'm going to give it a page. I quickly discovered the best results come when I give it just one paragraph at a time. And if the paragraph is long, I give it half a paragraph at a time. I also discovered I get the best results when I tell it, hey, I want you to take it from a graduate student level down to a senior undergrad level, and then go from a senior undergrad down to a sophomore undergrad, down to a high school grad, down to grade 10, and finally down to grade 8, take it down to grade 7, bring it back to grade 8. That's where I got the best results. But it was guiding it every step of the way. So partnership with AI is crucial. It does not replace human beings. It requires humans to actually be more expert in what's being taking place and what the AI is analyzing. That's where you get the best results. And hey, people are threatened that AI is going to put us all out to work. We're only going to be able to work 3 days a week instead of 5 or 6 days a week. Well, if you actually look at the history of AI, as technology has advanced, it's not delivered us from labor. It actually gives us more opportunities for labor. It's just that we stop doing the boring stuff and work on the more interesting stuff. And so we see, thanks to AI, people are more fulfilled by the jobs that they're doing today than they were in the past. I'm old enough to remember when elevators required a human operator. And then they came up with these automatic elevators, and suddenly all those elevator operators that had an 8-hour boring job were released to take on more interesting work. And what you've noticed here in America, as technology has advanced, the work week has increased. I know we're all told that we work 40 days a week or 35 hours a week, but if you ask the average American, they typically work much longer hours than the 35 or 40 they're paid for. And what's interesting is the most challenging jobs we have here in America, that's where people are working the longest hours. So I remember seeing this one joke comparing a European executive to an American executive. The European executive had a note on his door, "Gone camping, be back sometime in the fall." The American executive had a note on his door, "Getting a kidney transplant this morning, but I'll be available for emails and phone calls this afternoon." So. And what's interesting too is technology advances, vacations become shorter and shorter, not because the company is saying, hey, we want you working more. It's because people are so wedded to their jobs and so fascinated by their jobs, they would rather take a shorter vacation than stop doing their work. That's all thanks to AI, but it does have its implications. And that's one of the things I want to talk about here. I debate a lot of atheist physicists who refer to themselves as atheists, but as I get into the debate, I realize they're not really atheists. They're default atheists. They're so fascinated by their scientific research, they never think about the fact that death is coming. Because I would ask them a question, have you ever thought about death? No. Have you ever thought about how much time you got until you die? No. And I said, I don't think you're obeying the principle of the Sabbath. The principle of the Sabbath is to take regular time out of your busy work to focus on the most important issues of life. And so I run into these research scientists who are getting so much fulfillment from their research. And I'll tell you this, making a major scientific discovery is a real thrill. There's a real high you get from that. And a lot of my colleagues and peers, they just basically work to get that high. But it diverts them from the most important issues of life. And so that's something we have to be careful about with AI, is it delivers us from boring tasks and allows us to focus on more challenging, interesting tasks. It can also be addictive, where we no longer obey the principle of the Sabbath. Limitations of AI. It's totally dependent on the databases. It can't generate new databases, as already said. It can massage databases and create what appears to be a new database, but it can't develop a brand new database. And AI becomes competent only after relevant data is provided within a constrained range. If you don't constrain it, you basically get garbage. And AI can churn out fluent reviews on almost any topic, but struggles with mathematical queries requiring reasoning. So you may have been amazed. You can take Gemini or ChatGPT and say, hey, I'm interested in this subject, say how elements are manufactured inside the nuclear furnaces of stars, and within a few seconds, it'll pop out a paper for you. And you say, hey, I want the paper to be 30 pages long. It'll do that in a few seconds. I want it to have endnotes. It'll do all that for you. It'll check to make sure there's no typos in the thing. It can do all that within seconds. But try getting it to solve a math problem, and you'll see how limited AI is. So, for example, they had ChatGPT take grade 9 algebra tests, something that your 14-year-olds when they're junior high school would do. They sit down for an hour, and typically with a grade 9 algebra class, the average score is going to be around 90%. ChatGPT scored 26%. So, and keep in mind the energy that went into it. And so, however, they now have developed a super math AI system. It's called Minerva. Minerva is 3 times the size of ChatGPT. And Minerva only looks at math. And so unlike ChatGPT, which is basically analyzing everything that's up on the internet, Minerva only looks at mathematics textbooks and examples of the solutions of mathematical problems. But it's been fed a database that's 3 times bigger than the total database of ChatGPT. Even with all that, it only achieved a 50% score. And you say, well, which 50% did it get right? It simply was copying the solutions that had been fed into it. So where it had a sample algebra question that was already in its database, it got that right. But if it wasn't in the database, it got it wrong. So even with its massive size, and it required an entire month of training just to get up to 50%. So the first time they let Minerva run, it was getting a 1% score on solving simple algebra math problems. But after a month of intensive training, it got up to 50%, but they couldn't push it past 50%. Basically making the point, no matter how powerful the AI system is, it can't reason. We humans can reason, AI cannot reason, but it's amazingly efficient at analyzing enormous databases quickly and spitting out the results that we ask it to do. So Minerva's success depended on the user prefacing their question with relevant examples. So if you give it enough examples, it looks at the example and says, I think that's the right answer. It only appears to reason by using templates it's encountered before. Now, here's something you need to understand. Getting Minerva up to the point where it could get a 50% correct score on a grade 9 algebra test required more than 10 gigawatt hours of energy, which is enough to power 1,000 US households. So one math problem costs 13 million watts. How much wattage does a junior high student need to solve one problem? About 20 watts. So you can give a junior high boy one hamburger, and it can solve, like 100 math problems. What do you have to give Minerva? You got to give it 13 million watts in order to solve just one problem, let alone a whole set of problems. And so we're facing an energy crisis with the AI systems. I mean, you, the user, you probably don't notice it because, ChatGPT might charge you maybe $20 a month to use the system. But because they got millions of users, hundreds of millions of users using it, they can pay for the electricity that's required to maintain the system. But one of the books I've written is on global warming, weathering climate change. And one of the problems is driving global warming is the huge energy demands of AI systems. So this is what's causing us to have to burn more fossil fuels in order to keep these large AI systems going. Now, the largest AI machines are getting better and better at answering questions within the scope of their training goals, but they lack entirely the ability to answer new questions. They can answer old questions, they can't answer new questions. It can't make sense of something it's not seen before. So it's totally dependent on what's been fed into it, what it can see before. Weak IA and strong AI, these are two terms you may have heard of. Weak IA is referring to these huge computer systems that can solve specific problems, but lacks general cognitive abilities. It lacks a mind, it lacks a capacity for original reasoning, it lacks consciousness. Now, there are a number of people working on AI that think we can develop strong AI. Strong AI would be an AI system that possesses the equivalent of human consciousness, a human mind, and human reasoning power. And this endeavor has been going on now for 2 decades, and we're still no closer to developing a strong AI system than we were before. And the latest scientific literature is now developing consensus we never will. This is something that's unique to human beings. Our machines are not going to be able to do this. The brain is actually different from these computer systems in that strong AI ignores what's called the mind-body problem. And so in my office, I got a number of books on what the brain can do and what the brain can't do. And it's interesting, you've got these nearly 1 trillion neurons in the human brain. By the way, our brain is the biggest it can possibly be if you count how many neurons are in the brain. Incidentally, Neanderthals have a brain the same size we do, but has way fewer neurons. It's the number of neurons and the connections between the neurons that determine the capability of the brain. And we now realize in brain research is you can't have an animal with a bigger brain with the number of neurons we have. The human brain is at the limit of the laws of physics. So when you visit Roswell, you'll see all these statues of these aliens with these enormous brains. Violates the laws of physics. You got a brain that big, it's going to cook itself to death. And incidentally, notice that with human brains, if you get a temperature of, say, 104 degrees, the doctor gets worried because that now starts to kill the brain. And so it's making the point that the human brain is at the very limit of how big it can be and how functional it can be. But the human brain by itself does not explain the human mind. You can explain the hardware of our human brain with all the neurons that are there. You can even explain some of the software capability. You cannot explain the programming capability. This is something a number of scientists who study the brain have worked on, is that yes, there's something about the human mind that transcends the limits of the capability of the hardware in the human brain. It can't invent, it can't program. That's something outside of the physical realm. So AI has actually demonstrated that the human brain is not a computer, and it's not a system of simply hardware and software. It does more than what hardware and software can do. This is called the mind-body problem, how the mind is independent of the physical body of the human being and the human brain. So it's actually revealing the biblical principle that we humans have a duality, that we are physical, but we're also spiritual, and that when our physical body dies, our consciousness continues. Our consciousness is not embedded in the human brain. I've got 50 books in my office at Reasons to Believe headquarters on the goal to determine what's the cause of human consciousness. And these books are all written by atheists and agnostics. But one thing they all have in common, they write 300 or 400 pages trying to determine the origin of human consciousness. What they all share in common is their concluding statement: we do not have a clue. We do not have a clue because they're trying to find the origin of consciousness in the physical realm. It's not in the physical realm. It's in the non-physical realm, and it explains things like near-death encounters, experiences, out-of-body encounters, where people recognize, hey, our consciousness is not within the physical body. It's independent of the physical body. As the Bible says, when we die, our consciousness continues. And it continues for everyone who dies. So AI limitations are proving that strong AI never will be achieved. It also establishes the biblical doctrines of human exceptionalism and human dualism. According to the Bible, we're the only species of life on the face of the earth that is physical and spiritual. We alone have the capability of communicating with being or beings beyond the physics of the universe. And what we see in the Bible is that God has created two distinct species of intelligent life. One species is constrained by the laws of physics, we human beings, and angels that are not so constrained. But in both cases, there's this spirit element that is independent of the human body. So AI only possesses a physical nature, and strong AI now concedes this point. Humans are physical and spiritual, uniquely endowed with symbolic capability and the capability of forming a relationship with a being beyond the cosmos who created everything. AI cannot invent new symbols. That's unique to us human beings. We invent symbols and use symbols to do things that can't be done independent of what we already have there. That's unique to human beings. So the Neanderthals do not invent symbols. I read one paper where they said, hey, here's proof that Neanderthals had an alphabet. It was basically 4 lines on a piece of rock. I said, hey, I grew up in British Columbia. I've seen places where bears make lines along a tree or along a rock. I don't think they're developing an alphabet. But we see with human beings, we not only can produce an alphabet, we can produce a number system. At the conference, I was wearing a T-shirt with Maxwell's equations of electromagnetism on them, completely different symbols than you see in numbers and letters. This is unique to human beings. But the relationship begins by asking God to do for you what you cannot do for yourself. The fact that we're spirit means we can recognize that we have an imperative. As it says in Ecclesiastes, God has written eternity on our hearts. God has written his law upon the hearts of every human being. What I've noticed when I debate atheists, they all acknowledge that they have a moral imperative on their life. Where did that come from? If we're just purely physical, there should be no moral imperative anywhere. We don't see it in the animals, we only see it in human beings. And we have this feeling that we got purpose and destiny. I was speaking at the Skeptic Society conference. Well, I wasn't really speaking, I was debating one of the atheists there at the end. But I got to hear lectures from 5 other atheist physicists. Every one of them said there is no God, the universe is only physical, but they insisted that they had purpose and value in their lives. The fellow I debated was a particle physicist, and he was the one lone speaker there that said, these speakers are wrong. If there is no God, we're no better off than a rock. We have no more purpose or value than a rock does, or a piece of dust, or just any kind of particle in the atmosphere. But given that there is a God out there, given that we do have a moral imperative written on it, Job was the one who recognized there's a law written on my heart, and I'm not able to live up to that law. But he says, as I look out at the creation, I see that there's a God that's powerful enough to create this magnificent scene. He could see 15,000 stars in the sky. He could see the Milky Way. That taught him that the God that's out there is very powerful. He says, look at all that he has provided. He's obviously very caring and very loving. He must be incredibly intelligent and wise. A God that wise, that intelligent, that caring, that loving, that powerful must be able to do for me what I can't do for myself. And what you see in the 19th chapter of Job, Job said, I know that my Redeemer lives. I will see him on the last day because I've committed to have him do for me what I can't do for myself. He says, I will stand with him. We actually write about that in this book, Testable Faith. So again, pick up your copy there. But on purpose, I left some time for Q&A. And as usual, when I do Q&A, you can ask me anything you want. Any subject of science, faith, the Bible, whatever goes. Sometimes people even ask me how much I weigh. Let's not do that. Let's keep on something a little more serious. So who's got a question? Yes.
So I like to play around a lot with AI book LM, which only uses the sources you upload to it.
Right.
So to test it, I uploaded a novel that I wrote to see what I could do with it, and it was spitting out psychological analyses of the characters and things like summaries even in the form of diaries that the characters wrote and that sort of thing. So to really push it, I asked it to give me summaries of 5 potential sequels. And it did. It just spit out like a whole series of books, just like after a few minutes. And for the most part, it was good. So I'm wondering, at what point, or are we there already, where an average person will not be able to tell if something that is supposedly creative is being generated by AI?
Well, you've been talking about using AI to say, hey, I've written this novel, and give me 5 other sequels that I can write. And you got back pretty decent response. You're going to fine-tune it to try to improve it a little bit. But how is the average Joe going to be able to figure out that this was written by you as opposed to written by the AI system? Professors are facing this now in their college courses, where students are basically writing their papers using AI, and the students aren't learning anything. And so there's actually a war going on at the college level, where professors are using AI to determine the degree to which their students are using AI, the degree to which they're cheating. And then what's happening is the students are saying, okay, I'm going to use AI to counteract the professor's AI. So this is going back and forth. And it's gotten to a point now where professors are saying, when it comes to the exam, I'm going to have you write a paper, but I'm going to have you put your computer away, your smartphone away. You're going to be in the room. You've got 4 hours to write the paper in front of me. So that's how it's gotten. And it's not just kind of writing a paper. Art. AI can generate art that looks as good as a lot of what human artists produce. Incidentally, they've used elephants and given it a paintbrush and just have it slop on a canvas. And some of it looks better than some of this modern art that we see in museums, right? So how do you determine what is being just simply slopped together by AI and what's coming from a human being? Well, how you do that, and this is something I think can help you in writing a novel, it's not going to be able to produce something that's really brand new. So when this AI system is spitting out all these sequels for you to write, it's basically looking at all the novels that have already been produced and giving you some suggestions. But what you can do as a novelist is put in the novel something that no other novelist has even thought about, something totally brand new. That's going to make you stand apart. And likewise, if you can develop a new art medium that's independent of anything else that anyone else has ever been able to do, that's going to make you stand apart. But it's such now that our nation is considering a law which basically requires AI to reveal itself at every instance. And in some cases, this is crucial. So for example, there was a man who went to a therapist online. He assumed the therapist was a human being. The therapist was an AI system and was kind of using a Rogerian approach. Rogerian therapy is where a therapist just asks you questions, doesn't really tell you anything, just asks you questions, happy to respond. Well, what happened to this man, he thought he was talking to a female human rather than an AI system, wound up divorcing his wife and trying to marry his therapist. And so now they're saying, hey, if the therapist is an AI system, they need to reveal themselves as an AI system to prevent that kind of consequence happening. This is basically telling us how good AI is becoming, and therefore we need to actually bring in the ethicists to try to help us. But I just read a paper recently saying AI is advancing at such a rapid clip that the ethical controls on AI are going to be outstripped by the speed with which AI is developing, and every technological advance can be used for evil or it can be used for good. However, if it's advancing exponentially like AI is today, evil will overcome the good. And so people have been speculating, maybe the end of human civilization is only 200 years away, because AI will basically develop at such a rapid pace that evil will overcome good, and that'll be the end of us. I'm not so pessimistic, because AI systems demand huge amounts of energy. Eventually, the economists are going to come in and say, we got to put a stop to this. The energy demands are just more than we can afford. So I think there's going to be a limit to how much AI can advance. But a time will come when we will no longer need to have a person behind the driver's wheel. And can you imagine the benefit to our economy where we can basically set 10 million truck drivers free to do more challenging work? That's going to be coming probably within the next 10 years. Okay, one more question? Yes.
Hang on a minute. People can't hear you. Wait.
To go with his, what's that going to do to plagiarism within writing books, music, and all that? That's been a big deal even before AI, it seems like.
Well, plagiarism has always been with us. AI just makes it a lot easier to engage in plagiarism. And so, again, we have professors who are using AI to detect plagiarism. And again, there's this war going back where people say, well, I'm going to plagiarize, but I'm going to use AI to make subtle changes so it doesn't look like it's plagiarism. And then people are writing software to actually be able to detect where somebody's actually doing that. So yeah, there's an AI war going on at multiple levels. But I would say to the student that's attempted to use plagiarism, you're going to get a lot more benefit if you do it yourself. I mean, as a professor, I've had students who have plagiarized. It's like, hey, you're not going to really learn anything by going to this extent. Moreover, you're not going to have the joy of original production. Is that, hey, you're going to feel a lot more satisfaction. And the problem is when people use AI to an extreme, they get a degree, but they wind up getting a job where they're completely incompetent to function. And it's like, hey, you need to be thinking long term. And I think that's the problem with a lot of students. AI gives them short-term success, but long-term failure. So we as professors, I think, need to help people with that. And incidentally, I think that's going to happen in the church. And so if you're running a Sunday school class, be careful about how people can use AI and therefore not benefit.
Yeah. We have time for another question. Raise your hand. Okay. Sarah?
Thank you for coming and speaking about this. I work with AI and process reengineering in my job. And one thing we talk a lot about is the bias or the unconscious bias that we create when we create these AI solutions. And I think a lot of people experience it in just their day-to-day activities. So what can we do to be on guard as we're interacting with these AI solutions and just be aware of that bias that we might be encountering?
Excellent question. Every AI system has a bias. So before you use the AI system, you want to see, okay, what databases is it analyzing? So for example, if you're using ChatGPT, essentially what it's doing is giving the common denominator of what's already on the World Wide Web. Well, I'll tell you as a Christian, Christian perspective does not dominate the World Wide Web. Secularism does. And so you need to anticipate that, hey, if you ask AI, say a spiritual question, it's probably going to spit back to you something that has a secular or materialistic bias. You need to be aware of that. However, AI is catching up. Often the AI system will say, okay, are you a Christian? What kind of Christian are you? And it'll kind of give you what you want. But again, as an AI user, you have some control over the databases. So for example, when I use ChatGPT, I'm very careful in saying, I don't want you searching for X, Y, and Z, or I know I'm going to get a biased answer. I want you to focus on this. But also be aware of what databases it's not analyzing. So for example, ChatGPT does not look at the scientific peer-reviewed literature. You're going to be getting the popular internet response on that topic, which could be way off what the real science is saying. And so again, be aware of what databases it's searching and recognize most AI systems will allow you to narrow the search to eliminate some of that bias. So hopefully that'll help.
Hey, Brother Hugh, I appreciate you talking about the human brain and strong AI. So for those of us who like science fiction movies, because we see a lot of these where basically the computers, the AI systems end up taking over the planet, taking over the world. Relate that to what you were talking about with strong AI and the human mind real briefly.
Well, I have a hard time when I watch an AI movie with my sons because I keep telling them how many times the plot is violating the laws of physics. Yeah. So And I can enjoy science fiction if they're only violating the laws of physics once per minute, but when it gets past 4 times per minute, I have a hard time with that. So, and I have a hard time watching these science fiction movies where they got the computers ruling over human beings. It's like, hey, we already know they can only analyze databases they already have. However, one that I thought was interesting is one that came out in 2000. I think it was called 2001, An Odyssey, something like that, where they had a computer that they built in self-preservation. So basically, the computer is software to guarantee that humans would not work to destroy the computer. That actually is possible. And so, again, we need to be careful not to program a computer in such a way that is designed to prevent us from pulling the plug on it, for example.
So evil people can manipulate anything for evil purposes.
They can manipulate anything for evil purposes, but don't worry about an AI system becoming conscious. That's not going to happen.
And just one more brief one, because it's in the news now with the tariffs on China and the rare earth minerals and the need for that for chips. Can you speak to that? Because I know we have them in America, but 90+% comes from China. Can you say something briefly about that?
Yes, China has these rare earth minerals and in some cases a near monopoly, but it's not an absolute monopoly. Those minerals exist in significant abundance here in North and South America. We just haven't exploited them yet. So as long as the Chinese are giving us a good price, maybe we should leave it in the ground. But if they start raising the price, we need to start mining it. And for a lot of these rare earth minerals, we actually have more than China has.
Right. So there is a future for us with them in America. We just haven't accessed
There
it.
is, and one thing I'll say about AI in China, they have these cameras everywhere. They can tell who you are just by looking at your face. What's happening now is that Chinese citizens are wearing hoodies to prevent the cameras from facial recognition. But now China's come out with an AI system that can tell who you are just by the way you walk.
Wow.
So that's how good AI can be. And when you read the book of Revelation about how there's going to be a dictator that's going to be able to control everything, I think they're going to be using AI, basically saying, we know where you are and what you're doing all the time. AI can do that.
Wow.
So yeah, an evil individual can use that to control the behavior of human beings.
Yeah. Would you say thank you to Brother Hugh?
Yeah. Yeah.